Hey guys, my name is Marcy. I'll be presenting the movie Room today. I wanted to do a video format just because I really enjoyed this project and I also think it's better explained this way. So the plot of this movie starts off by introducing 5-year-old Jack, whose entire life consists of his ma, which is Joy Newsom. She was held captive for 7 years by her predator, Old Nick, the man who they call him that. The man, they depend a lot on him, and such as like food, water, clothing, utilities. Whenever Old Nick stays for extended visits in the room, Ma will not let Jack see him or vice versa. Jack, who is supposed to hide asleep in the wardrobe, stays in there and just pretends that he's not there. Old Nick has no desire to see his biological offspring anyway, doesn't really care for him in that sense. To shield him from anything that is happening to them, Ma has told Jack that the two of them and Old Nick are the only real things, and that what Jack reads about in books or sees on television are not real. So Jack believes all this and eventually turns into like some form of conflict between the both of them when Ma tries to, revert back to, this whole theory of nothing is real but, except we are. So when she tries to tell him the truth, there's, some hesitation and some denial from Jack. And we see this as the movie goes on. So, they try to escape, but things are very hard because Joy has tried before and has, failed at her attempt, and so which, led her to not ever trying again until now. She made this decision to try to escape, partly due to Jack's age and when he can now understand things better. So she, comes up with a plan to pretend that Jack is dead and rolls him up in a rug and makes Old Nick take him in the back of his truck to go bury him someplace else other than the backyard. So this little clip kind of shows a little bit about what Jack had to do to, save both of them. And he was pretty successful at this because he ran into a stranger who saw Old Nick trying to shove Jack back into the truck, which eventually led to, the person Jack ran into call the cops, and uh, which then, led them to the shed where Ma was hidden. All thanks to Jack. So we can thank him for his heroic, um, character. Another thing that they would have to deal with is adjusting to their new life outside of room. There were things that they weren't used to, such as, the lighting, which we can see whenever Jack opens his eyes, that it just kind of like sort of hits him. He's not used to that much light exposure to his eyes. Another thing we see is when they're in the hospital, they give them a lot of medication for antibiotics, and they have to wear the facial masks to protect them from germs that they haven't been exposed to, and pollen and things like that. So it's very interesting as the movie unfolds, and they end up definitely developing more maturely, and Jack opens up and is able to be more social outside of the room. Some overreaching themes that I saw are a child growing up and a parent learning how to raise a child. I believe that Jack growing up throughout this whole movie was a very important theme because, it was based on a mother raising a child and the child learning to grow in that environment. So I've heard a lot of how the environment shapes who you are, but it also, has to do with genetics. So in this particular case, the environment definitely played a huge role, but it also kind of didn't, because Jack seemed to be a normal kid and he had, the same imagination that all kids have. He was very happy, very enthusiastic. He had drawings all over the walls, and he was always curious and asking questions about things. So we also see a big difference whenever he leaves room, and whenever he's outside in the real world with his grandparents in his grandparents' house, and we see how he connects with other people, but it takes him a little bit longer than, than normal kids, just because he's been kept, in a shed that's, 10 by 10, and it was very different for him. So we also see parent learning how to raise a child. That one mainly just refers to what Joy was going through. She was held captive at an early age, and then, soon thereafter was thrown into motherhood, and, quickly had to change roles into protecting her child and not protecting her. So that we see a lot through the movie. We can see that, her parenting styles really were affected by the trauma that she had gone through, and also because, she's like I said, everything was now centralized to protecting Jack. We see that she does a good job by, learning him or teaching him, sorry, how to bake a cake, or teaching him how to read, teaching him yoga, and engaging in activities that will, um, make his development, as healthy as it can be in that environment. So here we see a type of, in the movie, there's a type of disorganized and disoriented attachment. I feel like we can take a look at some of the scenes where Jack um, and Ma were debating on whether if things were real or not. The first time she told him that, there was more life outside of world and that it was like beautiful and things like that, Jack was very in denial, and um, it made Ma upset. And so then, she kind of got a little bit of a immaturity to the whole conversation, because she, after that, she ignored him and then just didn't talk to him the entire day. She yelled back at him, and so it was a very, conflicting type of thing. And we see in this type of relationship where it happens whenever there's parents that have been through trauma and maybe have been abused themselves. So this was that case, and although this case isn't super, it's obviously not super popular, but there are parents who go through abusive child, they have childhood memories that are, where their parents have been abusive, and thus it's shaped the way that they parent themselves. We also see Piaget's pre-operational period, and this more refers to Jack himself, because it just shows how he retains the information that he's put through, and how the environment again shapes who he is. He is learning how to, deal with the outside world and deal with everything that he's not used to. One thing I will mention is that Jack has a narratives like throughout the whole movie. Towards the very end of the movie, or kind of to the beginning or middle of the movie, I'm sorry. He talks about how like everything outside of room is very different, and that, there's lots of noise. There's always like people are constantly on the go. Everybody's always busy, and everybody, you just need to be in one place at one time, really fast, and like there's just a lot going on as compared to room. One thing that I saw that was a little bit different was that, his development changed throughout the course of the movie, just because he was put in a different environment and a more nurturing one. So as far as like the reaction and observations that I saw that Joy had definitely some trauma which affected her style her of parenting. And by this I mean that she definitely went through some trauma. She had a predator that captured her for 7 years, and you had to abide by his rules and do whatever he wants. And not only that, but you went through, some psychological, physical, and emotional abuse at that. So we see a lot of like scenes where Joy really questions the way she's parenting, or maybe the things that she does are not the best choices, but hey, at least she's trying. But there are some pros and cons. I believe that, the fact that she was teaching him how to, how to read and things, and how to develop inside of room and grow to be a normal child, I would say, was, a pro on her side. Another thing that I will give her is that she fought for her child, and she kept them there safe, away from Nick. Um, and one last thing is that she sacrificed both of them by, putting a lot of faith in Jack. And so I feel like that is it's the ultimate mother's test. Like, that just shows that, she really loved him and tried to give the best that she could for him. Jack was very dependent and also had trouble speaking to older adults whenever they left a room. Whenever he was inside of room, he was very dependent of Ma. He was, constantly, like, with her, so that's all he knew. When he was outside, he was very shy. He spoke very softly, um, and but, we see that he grew to become more independent and social with others. The very last scene of the movie, it ends by him playing with one of the neighborhood kids and just getting along very well. He definitely opened up whenever he stayed with his grandparents, and I think it definitely helped whenever Ma left him for a while to get help. And that's another, pro to the style of parenting that we saw uh, kind of develop and mature as the movie went on. And that is it, guys. Thanks so much for listening in. I know that it was a long video, but the movie was definitely worth it. Check it out, and you guys have a good night.